Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sprint 196 review. This is a normal 2-week sprint. Let's get started. I'll start with the overview. Jeffrey will do the UI, Adam on providers, Joe on the platform, and Keenan on the API. As you can see, Sprint 196 was a relatively normal sprint with 74 PRs merged this sprint. And the distribution was pretty standard as well, with bugs and tests and enhancements, pretty spread out. Over to Jeffrey with the UI.
Thank you, Jason. In this sprint, 15 PRs got merged into the UI Classic repo, out of which 7 are bugs, 2 enhancements, and a few others. I can explain about them in the following slides. While rendering the container dashboard charts, the charts were throwing up an error. David had fixed this by adding proper check on the record before it was being accessed. Next slide. The application settings links were moved higher because when it moved from the header to the left nav, few users missed this link, and since they were expecting it to be higher in the list, we had to move it below the My Settings link. Next slide. Some of the chart legend items do not fit in the widget frames. This was fixed by modifying the dashboard widget style sheets. Next slide. The AutoSD team fixed the validation problems while trying to add a storage manager. Next slide. This ensures that the saved reports that get deleted are removed from an array in order to prevent an error if the user decides to delete more reports. So this fix was made by David. Next slide. The dashboard charts were not being displayed correctly. David fixed them by adding additional style fixes. Next slide. The component class prop in the password field caused an error since the React didn't expect this DOM element attribute to be in a camel case, but rather than in a lower case. So the AutoSD team had fixed this issue. Next slide. Melody had converted the associate-dissociate floating IP form pages to React. Next slide. As the catalog summary pages were also converted to React. Next slide. And for the others, the moment time zone was updated to a newer version by Gilbert. The generalized cloud network factories PR are part of the effort by Nasser to move the provider-specific code out of core repositories. And for the last PR was from Joe, who made nil checks on the objects which calls the support functions. That's all from the UI side. Over to Adam.
Thank you. So for providers this sprint, we made notification types pluggable, able to be loaded from the various plugins. Specifically, this change was for the AutoSD team who wanted to raise a notification for one of their events. So we already had code in core to do this, but obviously you had to have a notification type definition, and we didn't want to put provider specific notification types in core. So now you can put the notification types YAML into your plugins content directory if you want to add your own notification types. The AutoSD team added the physical storage name to the event timeline display so that you can see the name of the physical storage that is associated with that particular event if the event is for physical storage. We made a change to use unbundled exec to prevent issues with the core bundler environment variables overriding the callers when using bundler inline. This is specifically for the provider workers, which are meant to be exec to replace the memory address space from its caller. The and vars were being inherited from the parent process, and that was causing issues with gems not being able to be loaded in the child process. As mentioned in the UI slides, Nasser removed a bunch of provider-specific cloud network factories out of core. In addition to doing that in the UI, he also did it across API and all the providers. So that was a nice change to get those out of the core repos. For AutoSDE, as we mentioned, they created a notification for critical event types. They added a refresh workflow to wait for native tasks to complete. So if you, for example, add a storage or add a physical storage or remove physical volume, they were kicking off a refresh immediately without waiting for the task to complete. We already had a reusable state machine that was in core for this particular purpose. And so they implemented that so that we now wait for that. We pull on the task that gets returned, wait for it to finish, and then kick off a refresh. There was some follow-up changes to that initial PR that they added some refactoring and improved that workflow in that follow-up PR. And they added a custom report so that you can see AutoSD events in the last week. Next slide. For Power VS, they fixed an issue where the task reference was picking up the incorrect value. There was some refactoring done when they went from provisioning only templates to VMs, and when they added the ability to provision a VM to a template. Some of the code got dropped, and so they were looking at the wrong reference. This was raising an error, and so the provision task was never completing successfully, so they fixed that one up. For VMware, we added a POC of a pure Ruby event catcher that doesn't use Active Record or Rails at all. So the memory usage for this is approximately 40 meg when a typical worker is in the 300 to 350 meg at startup. And so this is the pattern that we're looking to get to across as many provider workers as possible. This is just the first one that we put in, and we're going to try to get this to be the replacement for the Rails worker in the coming release. For RBVMOMI, we fixed the vmodal generator. It was not adding new properties to existing objects. It was only picking up completely new objects. And so there were a couple of additions in the vSphere 7 update 3, which we were missing. Community user reported that in the RBVMOMI Gitter room, and so we got that fixed up for him. And as part of doing that, we also added vSphere 7.0 update 3F support. Not sure what was wrong with update 4, but I guess it was a really small one. That is it for providers. Over to Jim.
Thank you. For core enhancements, Nasser added the messaging status to the appliance console summary screen. Next, I changed the frequency we check for changes in the HA database configuration, such as if a failover occurs or a new standby was added. Previously, it was 5 minutes, and I changed it to 2 minutes, so we pick up those changes quicker. Next, I added a logging prefix for all log lines in the Postgres HA admin, so we can better assist in troubleshooting a Postgres failover. Additionally, I added some changes to our tests to work with Ruby 3 and a newer RSpec mocks, which require test expectations to be explicit in regards to keyword arguments versus hashes when you're using the with concept with when you're testing method arguments. With Ruby 3, that is now required that you differentiate what you're actually testing. Next, Brandon updated the operator image to UBI 9. Brandon also updated the Golang dependencies used for building the operator. Next slide. For core bugs, Keenan removed the WS cockpit role from our settings for a server's currently assigned server roles. This was missed in a data migration when we removed cockpit. Alex updated our GitHub workflow permissions to restrict it to read the contents only. Next, Frank updated the translations to fix some minor bugs in a few language translations. Keenan removed running Rails 6.0 tests on the schema repository. Because as we start writing new migrations that are marked as Rails 6.1 migration, the test under Rails 6.0 can't actually run those migrations. Next, Jason removed various unnecessary Python dependencies in the appliance build. He also modified the gemset generator to remove the unused vendor jQuery 1x since it's unused and was getting flagged for security issues. Finally, I removed an unused high availability configuration handler for PG Logical. We had previously switched to the native logical replication handler and left that old PG Logical one unused, so I just removed it. On to Keenan for the API.
Cool, great. So yeah, most of the API changes were covered. Elsewhere, ML to do the UI added the associate disassociate floating IP addresses for VMs. So that got us there. Long list there. On to Jason for the rest.
All right, and that's it for our Sprint 196 review. The next review for Sprint 197 will be on October 5th at the normal time of 9:30. And I'd like to thank everyone in the community, thank all of our presenters today, and keep the contributions coming. Thanks, everyone.